This is lesson 8-6 and 8-7. So when you put that at the top, it's inequalities and solving inequalities. 8-6 and 8-7. Okay, so far we're going to look at just setting up an inequality. So our inequality signs, if you want to write those down, are greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. That's the four we're going to look at today. So on this first example, it says the DVD cost more than $15. So for the DVD, they said just use D. If it costs more than $15, it would be greater than 15. That would be your answer for that. We're just setting it up. This next example, a dog weighs less than 50 pounds. So D is less than 50. Okay, so I'm not even going to make y'all do one of these. We'll just talk about it, and then we'll look at the next example because this is pretty easy. So Amelia sold more than 40 magazines. So we could say A, more than would be greater than 40. Okay, the next one, Gino sent less than 35 texts yesterday. So that means he didn't send 35. He sent less than that, is less than 35. All right, let's look at the next example. Okay, example 2. I didn't realize that wouldn't erase. Wish I could just click it, but it doesn't. Okay. Okay, example 2. You must be at least 18 years old to vote. Write an inequality to describe the situation. Okay, so we will just say, we'll say A like they did for your age. At least 18. So we know we have the number 18. We're just trying to figure out what goes between it. So let's talk about that. When you are exactly 18, you can vote. So it could be equal to 18. So that means it's going to either be greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. It's going to have that or equal to sign underneath. So if you're under 18, you cannot vote. But if you're in your 20s or in your 30s or 40s, you can. So if you're greater than 18, you can vote. So it is going to be greater than or equal to 18. So I want you to pause the video and try number 2, and then I'll go over it with you. Okay, on example 2, or problem 2, it says a student must have at least 10 hours of instructor-assisted driving time to pass the course. Write an inequality to describe the situation. So we know we have a student, so I'm going to say S for student, and we know they must have at least 10 hours. So I'm going to have 10 on the other side. We're just trying to figure out what inequality sign goes between them. So if they have to have at least 10 hours, so that means if they get exactly 10 hours, that's good enough. So it could equal 10. So we know it's either going to be greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. So it's going to have that or equal to sign on bottom. Okay, then when it says they have to have at least 10 hours, that means any less than 10 and they won't pass. But they could have more than 10 and that would be enough. So it could be greater than 10 as well. So the student it needs to be greater than or equal to 10. That is how that would represent that situation. On example 3, it says for the given value, state whether each inequality is true or false. So it says 2t plus 8 is greater than 7. This semicolon just is separating the problem from what they want us to plug in to see if it's true or false. T equals -1. So we take this inequality and we just plug -1 in for t. That means 2 times t. So when we plug -1 in, it's now 2 times -1. Plus 8 is greater than 7. 2 times -1 is -2. Then plus 8. And they're saying it's greater than 7. So -2 plus 8 is 6. 6 is not greater than 7. So you would say this one is false for when t equals -1. So another example, p minus 42 is less than or equal to -2. And they said p is 40. So if we plug that in, 40 minus 42 is -2. Is -2 less than or equal to -2? It's equal to it. So that is true. Okay, let's try 3A only. So try 3A, pause the video, and then I'll go over it with you. Okay, 3A is just a true or false question. So they're saying 3.9 plus x is less than or equal to 12. This conjunction just means when x equals 6. So we take this and we plug 6 in for x, and then we solve and see if it's true. So So 6 plus 3.9, that is 9.9. And you say, okay, is 9.9 less than or equal to 12? Yes, it is. So that is a true statement for when x equals 6. Example 4, now we're going to graph inequalities on a number line. So on A, it says A is greater than 6. So you draw you a line. I always just put whatever number they're talking about in the middle. When you fill in your number line, it always gets bigger going to the right and smaller going to the left. No matter what number you start on, that is always true. So you have to make sure your number line's in the correct order. So then when we number it, we look to put a circle. It's either an open circle, and I like how it says it right here. An open dot means the number is not included, so for less than or greater than, because that means that number, like A, cannot equal whatever number you're talking about because it's only greater than it. So it would be an open circle. It's not included. So we would have an open circle at 6, and then it says A is greater than 6, so it's going to be getting bigger than 6. So your line goes to the right. Okay, on B, x is less than or equal to -1. So we draw our number line, and this is what I was talking about on it gets smaller going left. -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. That is getting smaller because they're negative numbers. So now it's less than or equal to, which means x could be -1. So our circle is closed in. And it says x is less than or equal to -1, so it's getting smaller. So our line is going left. That is how we would graph those. So I want you to do 4A and 4B. Go ahead and graph 2 of those. Don't worry about 4C on a number line. On 4A and 4B, we are graphing. So on 4A, we have x is less than 5. So once we draw our number line, you need to have 5. It can be in the exact middle. I just go ahead, whatever number we're talking about, I put it in the middle. And then fill in your number line on either side. Your number line is always getting bigger going to the right and always getting smaller going to the left. Even when you're talking about negatives, it has to be getting smaller going to the left. So I'm going to finish filling this in. Okay, so now we know our circle is at 5. We have to determine now if it's an open or a closed circle. So we have x is less than 5. Less than or greater than are open circles. Closed circles, are when it has the or equal to sign underneath it. So since it's just less than 5, it's also open because that means it cannot be 5. It can only be smaller. So it's open because that's not included. Now x is less than 5. If that confuses you, this one's pretty easy, but if that confuses you, plug a number in on either side and it should be true. If I plug 6 in, is 6 less than 5? No. Is 4 less than 5? Yes. So that means 4 is included in my line. So it goes this way. On 4B, it's at -2, so I'm going to put -2 in the middle. This is where I was talking about it always gets smaller going to the left. So right here would actually be -3 because -3 is smaller than -2. Okay, so when I go to -2, x is greater than or equal to. So that is a closed circle. It's filled in. That means x can equal -2. Then it says x is greater than or equal to. So if you plug a number in from either side, if I plug -3 in, -3 is greater than or equal to -2. That is not true. It's smaller. -1 is greater than or equal to -2. So it goes to the right. Now, on those two problems, if you follow the arrow, it worked. But remember, that does not always work. If they had put -2 is less than or equal to x, that's the same thing as this, but it still goes this way even though the arrow would now be the other way. So don't follow the arrow. For example 5, now they give us a graph and they want us to write an inequality. So first we look and we see it's at 2. So whatever letter you choose, we know we're going to have x and 2. It's an open circle, so we know it's either greater than or less than. It's not included, so it's not equal to. And the shaded part is getting bigger than 2, so x is greater than 2. So I'm not going to make you try any of these. We're just going to look at it. So on 5A, I'm going to go ahead and say x. My circle is at -3. It is filled in, so it's either going to be greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. And if we look at the shaded part, it's getting bigger than -3, so x is greater than or equal to -3. On 5B, it's at -2. Sorry, that's a really big negative sign. And my circle is open, so it's either less than or greater than. If I look, the shaded part is getting smaller, so x is less than negative 2. Let's go ahead. I think that was the last one from that section. Okay, now we're going to look at the next one I told you we were doing, solving inequalities. So on this first example, we have x plus 5 is greater than 12. So we solve for x just as if this was an equal sign. So to get rid of 5, to get x by itself, we do the opposite of whatever's happening to it. So I subtract it from both sides. It cancels here, and I'm left with x. This comes down is greater than 12 minus 5 is 7. So x is greater than 7. So if you wanted to check this, you wouldn't plug that number in. You would plug a number bigger than that. So they used 9 because 9 is greater than 7. 9 plus 5 is 14, which is greater than 12. So yes, that's true. So I want you to try just 1A. Don't worry about 1B, and then we'll move on. Okay, now we are solving the inequality. We solve it just like an equation, except now we have an inequality sign instead of an equal sign. So I'm trying to get y by itself with it, so I have to get rid of the 10. It's being added. So just like with an equation, we do the opposite and subtract. My y comes down, that cancels, that comes down. I have less than 3 minus 10 is negative 7. So that would be my answer. Y is less than negative 7. The next example says solve 3 is less than or equal to b minus 1 and 1/3. Graph the solution on a number line. So on this, we're solving for b. So the first thing we can do is get rid of this. It's being subtracted, so we can add it to the other side. Okay, it cancels from over here, and I'm just left with b. This sign comes down. This is actually pretty easy because you just look at your whole numbers. 3 plus 1 and 1/3 is just going to be 4 and 1/3. And we're already done. Okay, they went ahead and switched it around the other way. If you do that, make sure your sign goes with it. 4 and 1/3 is smaller than b, so when you flip it around, b has to be greater than 4 and 1/3. I would just leave it like this, not to trick yourself. But the next thing we do is we're going to graph it on a number line. Okay, so on our number line, we know it's at 4 and 1/3. So if you notice, here's 4, here's 5. They just put it closer to 4. We can't tell exactly that it's at 1/3. That's okay. As long as you get close, it's accurate. So it is greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So it is a closed-in circle. And b is bigger. 4 and 1/3 is smaller than b. So it's going to the right. So I want you to try 2a. Don't worry about 2b. Just try 2a. You are solving it and graphing it on a number line, and then I'll go over it. 2a, we have to solve the inequality and graph it. Although I realize I wrote equals. That's not equals. It's greater than or equal to. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're solving for g, so I have to get rid of the 7. It's being added, so we do the opposite and subtract. Everything else comes down. 3 minus 7 is a negative 4. Now that I have that, I draw my number line. I start at negative 4. Remember, it always gets smaller going left. It's greater than or equal to. That tells me it is a closed circle at negative 4. This is what I was just talking about on some problems a few examples ago. Plug these numbers in. Negative 5. If I plug negative 5 in right here, is negative 4 greater than or equal to negative 5? Yes. That means my line goes over negative 5. It goes this way. At example 4, solve each inequality and then graph it on a number line. So we have negative 5x is less than 45. Now, we would divide to get rid of that 5, okay? But since it is negative, anytime we divide or multiply by a negative, your inequality sign is going to flip around. So when we divide both sides by negative 5, that inequality sign went from less than to greater than. It flips around. X is greater than 45 divided by negative 5 is negative 9. Then we graph that on a number line. It's an open circle. X is getting greater. On B, this says B divided by negative 8 minus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 8. The first thing we would do, like always, is get rid of the 1 by itself. So we would add 2 to both sides. When we do that, it cancels from this side. I'm left with B over negative 8. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. So now we would multiply, because this means b divided by negative 8. So to get rid of that negative 8, we would multiply both sides of the equation times negative 8. When you do that, since it was a negative, your inequality sign flips around. It's going to go from greater than or equal to less than or equal to. When we multiply, those cancel and we're left with b. Negative 6 times negative 8 is positive 48. So b is less than or equal to 48. You might make a note of that somewhere in your notes, that if you are multiplying or dividing by a negative, your inequality sign flips around. So then it's a closed circle. Sorry, that's in my video. And then you would graph going to the left. So I want you to try just 4a. Don't do 4b, and then I will go over it with you. On 4a, we have negative y over 4 is less than 3. So we're solving and graphing. This means y divided by 4. So to get rid of that 4, we're going to do the opposite and multiply both sides. Even though this negative is up here, it can go with either one of them. So I'm going to multiply both sides of this inequality by negative 4. That will cancel that, and I'm left with y. The only trick you have to remember, when you divide or multiply by a negative number, this inequality sign flips around. You have seen that before with Mr. Chadwick last year. It's just been a while. So it flips around because we multiply by a negative. 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. We have to do that because otherwise it won't make it true. So now we draw our number line, put negative 12 in the middle. It's just greater than, so it's an open circle. Y is greater than negative 12. So it goes to the right.